So the Lori Vallow Daybell case, it's in full swing. I'm going to recap day 2, and there was some pretty feisty moments that went on in day 2. I've got the footage, Lori being kicked out of the courtroom. You're not going to want to miss that right after the intro. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the channel. I'm Rebecca, your host of Crafting and Crime Daily, the show where I recap live trials. Before I get into the recap of day 2 of the Lori Vallow Daybell case, if you wouldn't mind hitting that thumbs up button, I would really appreciate. Helps YouTube push this video out to more people. And consider subscribing. I only need 52 more people to get to 4,000, and I want to do a 4,000 subscriber giveaway. A nice one, a really good one. Okay. So what happened on day 2 of Lori Vallow Daybell's case? Wow. First of all, just observing the courtroom, I can tell you that Kay Woodcock is there. Now, Kay Woodcock was the grandmother of JJ Vallow, who was killed by Lori and her husband, Chad Daybell, and her brother, Alex Cox. The story is, I always like to recap what are these trials about, but I would need an hour to tell you what this is all about. This trial comes on the tail end of her murder trial for her then husband, Charles Vallow. And that came on the heels of another murder trial where she was convicted of murdering her children, Tylee and JJ Vallow, and her current husband's then wife, Tammy Daybell. So she's already got 4 murder convictions that they are trying to keep out of this case. In fairness to her, I guess, I don't know, but she's on the edge of opening the door for that information to come in, those 4 murder convictions. And once the jury hears that, it's over. So we come into the courtroom about 9:40 because trial was supposed to start at 9:30 this day because, trying to make up for all this time that Lori was sick and her advisory council is not there. So the judge puts it on the record that she's got two attorneys. One of the attorneys had notified him the day before that he had childcare issues. He was going to be late. The second attorney said she would be there 9:30. 9:30 comes. He gets a text or telephone call from her saying she's in her office making copies. What? You don't have a paralegal or a secretary that can make copies for you? Now, I can sympathize. I ran a solo law office where I was everything. And if copies had to be made, I made them. But you're not representing, but you're the advisory council to Lori Vallow Daybell. Get some help. I'll help you. I'll help you. I'll make the copies for you. Okay. Anyway. So he tells Lori, if she's not here by 9:50, you're representing yourself. We're going to go on without her. And if this happened in federal court, she would be in the tank. I don't remember. I do have that footage for you here. Watch this. Oh, it's so interesting.
Yesterday, Mr. Abernathy, one of the advisory council, said he would be late today because he had a childcare issue, but that Ms. Hicks, the other advisory council, would be here and ready to start at 9:30. What time did that email come in?
Just the email came in at 9:20 that she was printing off pictures.
All right, so we got an email at 9:20 saying she's still at her office printing off pictures, which is wholly unacceptable. Ms. Daybell, you represent yourself. You do not need your advisory council here, but I'm going to split the difference. She's being sent an email that says if she's not here at 9:50, we're going to start. If there's pictures that need to be printed off, staff can do that. Staff can bring it over later, but should have been here at 9:30. If this were federal court, she'd probably be going into custody. I mean, this is ridiculous. All right, I'm just letting everyone know what the holdup is. We're going to start at 9:50.
Okay.
So then the prosecution makes it clear that before we start with witnesses, the prosecution is making clear that in her opening, remember at the end of her opening, she talks about how she's this peaceful, loving person and all she wants to do is spread the love. And, you can see flowers coming up around her and hearts and bubbles and fairy wings. And the prosecution said, she's opened the door. We want to bring in these 4 convictions. And well, the judge says, I thought the same thing when I heard that. But what she says in opening statements is not evidence. Now, if she elicits any of that from any witness on the stand, then she has opened the door wide. And she does open the door during this, just a crack, but it's open during this day's testimony. So there were a couple of witnesses on the stand before we get back to Brandon Boudreax and his cross-examination. Brandon Boudreax, the victim in this case, he was on his way home from the gym after having dropped his kids off at school and the park to go with her mother. He goes to the gym. He's there an hour and a half. He's on his way home. He sees this Jeep parked the way nobody's supposed to park on the street. It's like, you always park with the flow of traffic if you're going to park on the street in front of someone's house. This one was parked the opposite direction and was partially blocking his driveway. So he pulls up. He's in his Tesla. He pulls up and he's getting ready to turn into the driveway when he sees the back window of this Jeep. There was no rear tire. Jeeps usually have these rear tires. This one didn't have a rear tire on it. The windows were tinted, Texas license plates. He sees this window open up and the barrel of a gun come out. Bang! His window shatters and he takes off. So very soon he tells the police, he calls 911. We heard the 911 call. After this 911 call, the police come and they're investigating. And he tells the investigators that he suspects it's Lori and Alex. And the reason he suspects that is because he believes they just killed Charles Vallow. In fact, Alex did kill Charles Vallow. So he's afraid for his own life. But the jury's not allowed to hear all that. All they know is that there was an incident in Arizona. Anyway, at the home of Lori Vallow Daybell on July 11th. So the first officer, there was an officer on the stand that Lori had to finish his cross-examination, and really his involvement was minimal. He found a projectile. And then there was a second person on the stand. She had ring camera video of a vehicle. And when I tell you this was minimal, it was minimal. She had the ring camera set up on her, I don't know if it was front porch, back porch, but most of it was enclosed in a wood structure, like a wood patio. So you could only see a sliver where the door was open to that wood structure, the wood area. So you could just see a sliver of the road. And at one point you see a vehicle. It was so quick, I don't even remember what it was. And then you do hear a loud bang. So I'm not even going to show you that. Well, I can show you that. Here it is. Listen for the loud bang. Okay.
Yes, if we could move. And if we could just show at the beginning we missed where.
So then we get Brandon Boudreax back for cross-examination. Now, this is what we've all been waiting for, because this took The judge had to take everything out of order because Lori was not prepared to cross-examine Brandon Boudreax. She was waiting to get her file from the private investigator and I guess for her attorney to make copies. So she's ready. She's going to cross-examine Brandon Boudreax. And she gets into like, oh, we first met in 2009. No, it was 2008. And they go back and forth about that for a few minutes. But we've known each other a long time. We've got a familial relationship. Everything was good between us until the end of 2018 is what he says. But I helped and she goes through each one of the children. I was there when so-and-so was born. I was helping you when so-and-so was born. And every time the prosecutor is objecting and it's sustained. And finally, the judge says, listen, you have a relationship with this guy. Okay, move on to something relevant. We get it. But she keeps going. She's still talking about the relationship. Would you agree I acted in a way that was loving? You hear that door? You hear the door? Yeah, it's opening. Sustained. Objection sustained. Am I a confrontational person? Objection sustained. There goes the door again. She can't talk about her character. And basically she's testifying. She can't elicit her character from him because if she does, that door is wide open and they can come in and say, oh, this loving, non-confrontational person is convicted of 4 murders. So she kept trying to reference a video that he was in dancing at a club called the Pink Pony. Every time that Pink Pony word came out of her mouth, there was an objection. It was sustained. He didn't have to answer the question. But I'm curious, what happened at the Pink Pony? And this all has to do with, Melanie, his wife at the time, suspecting that he was gay. No, maybe he just went with some friends to the Pink Pony and was having a good time. Doesn't mean he's gay. Anyway. So she keeps talking about trying to convince, was I the one that, you thought I was the one that convinced Melanie that you were gay and blah, blah, blah. So finally, because there were so many objections to sustained that, they go sidebar. And they are sidebar for like 10 minutes, which is a very long sidebar in front of the jury. They've all got headphones on and there's white noise. So you can't really hear what they're talking about. But, you see Lori doing this with her pencil. She's not happy. So he sends the jury out for a break or lunch, or I don't remember what. It might have been lunch by that point. And here's what happened after he sends the jury out. Listen to this.
Morning recess. We will resume in about 15 minutes. Please remember the admonition.
All rise to the jury.
All right, please be seated. The jury is no longer present. We've concluded that sidebar. A record's been made. I would just caution the defendant again. She needs to be very careful, and she's getting into areas that could open a huge door that I don't think she wants open. I'm going to make another record at 10:24 to 10:25. We held a sidebar that I don't think made it onto the court record. That sidebar again discussed similar issues of if the defendant brings in evidence or testimony that she was a good person and no ill intent and those sorts of things, and specific acts of her being a good person, it could open the door to other things that she may not want the door open to. The state the defendant and advisory counsel were at the bench when we had that short 1 minute sidebar, but I don't know if anyone wants to supplement the record on that. Ms. Kay?
Just, Your Honor, that again, the state did raise any issue of character evidence under 404A and 405, that if the defendant opens the door and tries to advise that she is a good person, a peaceful person, a kind person, a loving person, any of those other types of things, that we believe that would allow us under 405 to then bring in specific acts such as the murder of her children, her husband, and her current husband's wife.
All right.
Which would also be 404B that they withdrew.
And that would be
Yeah,
405.
they withdrew it, but if you bring up 404 that you.
Then all 404B is in, or do we get a hearing on what 404B can come in? If I open the door, do I get a hearing? We stop trial and I get a hearing on,
Stop. We'll have a very short hearing, okay? If you're going to introduce how you have great character and good character, we're going to have a short hearing on what evidence that they can bring in to rebut that character, which could
Okay.
include being convicted of 4 murders.
and
So
would you
talk
like,
to your advisory counsel during the break. And
you don't need to yell at me either.
yelling at you, okay?
Yeah, you are, and you do not need to talk to me that way. I'm
Take her
very
out. Take
courteous.
her out.
I'm very courteous to
Take
you.
her out. No, you have been nothing near courteous to me during the course of these proceedings. Talk with your advisory council about the rest of your cross. We're going to resume in 15 minutes.
All rise.
You do not have the right to talk to me like that. Ooh, 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 ooh. And the first time I heard this, I'm diamond painting, and I really wasn't watching. I was listening, and I'm diamond painting, and I did a double take, and I looked up because I didn't hear him say, "Get her out of here." I just knew that like this was not a good confrontation. I was a little stunned, but then the second or third time I watched it, I'm like, oh, he does say, "Get her out of here, get her out of here." And that's when you see a deputy come up behind her and take her out of the courtroom. And you can tell she's pissed. But when she comes back, again, he warns her, if you keep doing this, if you keep talking over me, talking over the prosecutor, when it's not your turn, he says, "I'm going to give you a turn. You'll be allowed to speak and say your piece. But if you keep doing this, then you're going to lose your privilege to represent yourself." That's not how he said it, but basically that's what it meant. And she said, "Oh no, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Your Honor. I'm sorry." Okay. So she keeps on with her questioning of Brandon Boudreax, and she's talking about this detective Pillar. He was the lead detective for this case, and he had given his phone number to Brandon Boudreax, and there was a lot of communications between them. And so she was, kept asking him about these communications. So finally they go sidebar again. And what comes out of this sidebar is that she is only allowed to ask him did he request financial, send me anything you have that would evidence Melanie's financial gain after your death, which was life insurance and the sale of the house and things like that. That's all she could elicit on those communications. But then the prosecution would be able to come back and elicit that, and they did, that not all of these communications had to do with this event. Okay. So now we know there's another event. Okay. So then we get Nathan. It would end it after. There was no more drama after that. Nathan Duncan takes the stand. He is the detective that photographed the Jeep in the garage at Lori's house on July 11th. This is the morning that Charles Vallow was murdered. That Jeep was in the garage. Alex had driven his Ford F-150 to that house the night before and had spent the night and was kind of there the morning Charles showed up to pick up JJ. This melee ensues where Alex claimed Charles came after him with a baseball bat, so he shoots and kills him. Well, Lori's been convicted of conspiracy to commit Charles's murder, that this was a conspiracy between her and Alex. So where was I going with that? Oh, this Detective Duncan. So that's why he was there, and he photographed the Jeep. So he had also extracted Lori for Style, the iCloud account, and the Lolly Time account, and was there to talk about the June 25th messages. There were messages on June 25th that were read. So the messages that Brandon Boudreax sent to Lori the night that he and Melanie were arguing for hours and hours, she did read those. She just she never responded. But the interesting thing was they elicited from him, and I don't remember if it was Lori or the prosecutor, that he spent hundreds of hours going through the Lori for Style iCloud account and a Lolly Time account. Now, if I'm a juror, I'm thinking hundreds of hours for this? Really? That's a lot. What else is going on here? So he also retrieved the infotainment center from the Jeep. And he explained it, and I'm going to try to tell you the best as I understood it was downgraded to some kind of lower model, and he couldn't get anything off of it. There was no data. He was not able to access any data. Then he tried to get GPS data from the Ford F-150. Couldn't get that either. So that was his stint on the stand. Then we get that lead detective that we were talking about with all the communications between him and Brandon. So the lead detective takes the stand. And one thing he said, and I wrote this down, he said the cleanliness of the damage, that bullet hitting that Tesla, is indicative of a fast-moving projectile. So he said pretty much early on in the investigation, Brandon identified Lori and Alex as possible suspects because of an incident that occurred in July of 2019. That's all he was allowed to say about it. So the jury knows there was an incident, and this caused Brandon to be on alert that it was Lori and Alex. So then he learned that Lori and Alex had moved together to Idaho in early September of 2019, and Melanie had moved there beginning of October. Now, remember, this occurs on October 2nd. So on October 1st, they got one of those MPCs. Is it MPC? It's those cameras, that the license plate reader cameras. So they found a license plate reader camera that had photographed the Jeep back in Arizona. Now, Alex is already living in Idaho, but the Jeep back in Arizona on I-40 heading towards Phoenix on October 1st, 26 hours before this attempted murder of Brandon Boudreax. And there was no wheel on the back of that Jeep. And this was Alex and Lori's, it actually was Tylee Ryan's Jeep. She's now deceased. And keep in mind, I haven't talked about this, but this shooting occurred on October 2nd. Now, we know what happened in September. We know that the deaths of Tylee and JJ occurred in September. They were both murdered because they were possessed by demons. Now, we also know from other, from information about this case, that this group of people, this cult, so to speak, believed also that Brandon Boudreax was possessed by demons. And October 2nd, they tried to murder him. So they notify the police in Idaho that Jeep is the center of this investigation. So the police in Idaho take possession of the Jeep, and it is inspected for fingerprints and gunshot residue. So we don't get to hear whether they found gunshot residue or fingerprints in the Jeep because the judge ended the testimony for the day. That was it. That's all we get to hear. So we'll find out on Monday whether there was gunshot residue in the back of that Jeep. I'm sure. Well, I don't know. We'll see. All right, guys. Have the great rest of your weekend. I'm going to be live this morning at 11. This will probably go up after that, but go back and watch the live. I'll see you guys later. Have a great day, everybody. Bye.